Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball
with Eir Sport. Both Munster v Leinster derbies exclusively live on Eir Sport.
And we're joined on the line by Matt Williams. You're there, Matt?
I am, Joe.
How you doing? Long time no talk.
I'm very good, mate. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to have you with us. And Keith Wood, you're there?
I am, of course. How are you doing, Joe?
Very good.
Hiya, Matt.
Hey, Woody. How are you, buddy?
I'm very excellent, thank you. Happy New Year, so to speak.
Same to you.
It is a sure sign that winter is coming when we're talking to you two.
Something like that. Game of Thrones reference and all. Winter is surely coming.
So
endless winter.
Yeah, our rugby coverage is brought to you by Eir Sport, the home of rugby in Ireland. Live coverage this weekend of Glasgow against Munster on Friday, 7:35 on Eir Sport 1. They have Ulster, Edinburgh on Eir Sport 2 at the same time, and there's also live coverage of Leinster Scarlets on the Saturday, and that's on Eir Sport 1 at 7:35. So we'll get into some of the Pro 14 action. The Rugby Championship actually has been on as well over the last couple of weeks. I don't suppose, Matt, you want to tell us that there's lots of chinks in New Zealand and they're peaking a year too soon and it's all going to be fine, because Bowden and the boys look pretty good right now, I'm afraid to say.
They were pretty sensational, weren't they? I was trying to console a few Australians just saying how good they were, especially that last game in Eden Park, which is obviously one of the hardest place in the world to go. I think the frightening thing about their win was they went through Australia time and time again. We know they can go around teams with their great width and their accuracy of their passing, but it was the fact that they cut the Australian defensive line to pieces with sheer pace of the ball, as in they're getting tackled and the ball is coming out of that ruck and away so quickly through Aaron Smith. They're playing the game at a level that no one on the planet is playing with just now. You hope they're peaking a year too early, but I don't think so.
No, at least say it like you mean it, for God's sake.
Yeah. No, I don't at all.
Yeah.
Do you know what I love about it, Joe? And I think when you're a fan of rugby and you kind of remember all the bits and bobs of it, but when you see New Zealand playing at the moment with the size of their backs, which are not big, they're getting slimmer and slimmer by the year, and you see some of the small guys coming on, when you see Mackenzie come on and see the devastating acceleration he has and the awareness passing then to Ben Smith, they're not big men. The jersey makes them look a little bit bigger, but these guys are light, an awful lot lighter than where we are at the moment, and they seem to be, I don't know that they're fitter, I think that's maybe the wrong thing to say, but they look fresh. They seem to look fresh a lot of the time, and it doesn't just depend on one or two players. All the players are kind of stuck in the middle of it. You see Brodie Retallick with his outrageous skills, some of the forwards with the front row forwards with their skills. So there's ball handlers in every single pod that they have on the field, and it's tough for an Australian when they're getting opened up like a can. But it's a pleasure to watch the standard in which they're bringing the game, which is pretty cool.
And it doesn't. You don't see it on the horizon that these slimmer, smaller backs are going to get bashed up or intimidated anytime soon, I presume.
Well, I don't see it in that fashion, because it's all about evasion, and it isn't just that they're fast, and but it's the sleight of hand. It is the awareness, seeing it early, playing it late. It is the balance under which they're running. They seem to be playing with a level of freedom that is brilliant. It's actually what you'd like to be teaching kids. It's very hard to do that, to suddenly change a team and an international team to try and change to do something similar to that. But for kids, you'd want to say, actually, look, this is a game for all sizes. It's becoming more so like that, and we get caught in trends all the time where you get bigger and you need your backs to be bigger and they need to do other different things, and it depends on the coach and it suits a whole variety of different factors, but they seem to be at a point in time where the players seem to be on the field for quite a long period of time, and they seem to be more slight.
Matt, if you were to grudgingly find a positive in it all, it might be that we copycat the best, and the best right now in New Zealand are playing a brand of rugby that I dare say you really like underneath it all.
I love it. I couldn't agree with Keith more. They're playing the game the the way the game was meant to be played. They're running, and they've got joy in their game. Keith and I would know that years ago that wasn't New Zealand. New Zealand were not as free-flowing as this. They were very forward-orientated, very turgid in some ways. They would grind out wins. And it was the Australian backs that were noted for flair. And you've got to say that's completely turned on its head. The New Zealanders at all levels are playing a wonderful brand, and we can learn like it. And I think that comes back to sometimes when I say about the Irish team, where all these other teams in the world are going with them. The French over the summer and the Australians. It'll be interesting to see how the Argentinians and the Africans go. But everyone can go with them for 50 minutes. But no one's going with them in that last half hour, 20 minutes of the game, because they're playing at a pace that and accuracy at that pace that no one seems to be able to live with. But they're also doing that in the Super Rugby. They're doing it in their club rugby. They're doing it in their under-18s, in their schoolboys, their under-20s. It's fantastic, and we need to emulate that. We need to copy it. And you know what? That will give the game, in all parts of the world, like Keith said, great joy, because those little blokes like Mackenzie and Barrett, these guys, Aaron Smith is the tiniest man you'll ever meet. You can't believe this guy's played so many test matches at international rugby. He's a very, very slight human being. Mm. And they are going back to what the game was designed for, men and women of all sizes for the game, and playing it at a wonderful, wonderful spirit of the game. I just hate that they wear black jerseys in their New Zealanders and they're beating us all the time, but I do truly admire them. I do.
Yeah. Joe, just on that one point, just to kind of wrap maybe that bit up, in the last World Cup, New Zealand, I think, had one injury of note, whereas all the other teams seem to have an awful lot more. Mm. So it's whether they're going to get smashed up or not, but they're not. They're not. They're kind of proof of it at the present moment in time that they don't seem to be.
Mm. Moving on to another point from the summer, I wanted to get both your thoughts on. There's kind of a back-to-school feel about the rugby tonight then. So Sam Warburton retired, obviously, over the summer and made a few interesting points about avoiding other 28, 29-year-olds having to retire. And he talked about potentially limiting the season to 25 games a season per player. But then made an interesting point. One, I must say I've thought myself, looking on from the safety of the stand or the seats at home, he highlighted the need, he said, for rugby to protect the jacklers. And Seán O'Brien was asked about this in the last couple of weeks. And, I mean, he was absolutely in agreement. He was saying you could be in a poach position and you'll take one big hit or someone will smash you and you survive it. And then you have to take another one and then you might survive it. And then there's still no whistle gone. And it's the third lad who does the damage to you. That's where you're getting so much punishment. 3 massive free shots and there's still no penalty. He said it's very hard when you're saying to the referee, how long do I have to survive this? It's sometimes 5-6 seconds when you look back, and in the 5 or 6 seconds there could be 5 lads piling in on you. Which I must, the thought has struck me, they do take a huge amount of punishment. It might be something, Keith, if the players are talking this way, that they'll have to look at.
Well, it's funny, they are both of an age where they don't remember that you could never put your hand on a ball in a ruck. And so that they have to protect the jacklers. When I started playing, you would never ever even think of putting your hand in because somebody would scream into you. And now they've tried to make it part of the game. I'm not a fan of it anyway. And I was always a huge fan of trying to bring rucking back into it, because if it's well policed, and it can be, it is probably a safer position. I hate it. Every time I see a guy going in like a limpet in over on top of a player and a ball and exposing the back of his neck, I don't like that anyway. So I don't know that we need to save it. I think we need to try and get rid of it somehow.
It strikes everyone as one of the most vulnerable positions you can imagine, Matt, to be in.
I must be back to school. Woody and I agreeing on everything. I detest it. I absolutely detest it. I think it's a blight on the game. I think it is. We worry about scrum time with injuries, and our scrums are very, very safe. But as Keith said, we come from an era when sex was safe and rugby was dangerous. Rucking stopped all that. Now, around 2004-05, when I was coaching Scotland, groups of people got on the judiciaries that penalised with suspensions players putting rucking at the breakdown. And so when we stopped being able to use feet and getting past the ball, this is when Jacqueline came in. I think it's incredibly dangerous. I think it's not so dangerous for the levels we're talking about. I hate seeing kids doing it. I hate the way that kids are exposed, but not just their necks and backs, your knees. You get pushed off on an angle like that. I think Jeremy Paul several years ago was a high-profile one. I think it was in a Lions test.
Paul O'Connell with his hamstring tendon was
Paul, exactly. It's just a really bad position, and I'd like to see it somehow removed from the game. But again, the breakdown is if you can see how the game's gone, we're only having 10 or 12 scrums a game, 15 to 20 lineouts, but there's 150 to 200 tackles or rucks in a game, and that's the area where players are exposed, and it's the area we need to police.
Okay. Looking ahead at the Pro 14 season, so we've had the opening weekend. Do you, through the small world, I'm sure, that is Australian rugby, do you know much of Andy Friend, Matt? Do you know him down the years at all?
Yeah, of course. Andy started as my assistant coach at the Waratahs back in the late 90s. I was the first one to employ him. I've known him many years. He's a lovely guy. He's got a good library of experience behind him. Been assistant to Dean Richards, Harlequins. Certainly had his own time, difficulties and successes at the Brumbies as a head coach. Not too long, but we've all got to go through that punch in the face. Went to an Olympic Games as sevens coach. Spent time in Japan as a head coach. So Andy's got a pretty good library there, and he's got a very difficult task on his hand, and losing at home first up, he's almost on a must-win on his second game, which is a difficult one for him.
What sort of character is he? What sort of, is he relaxed? Does he take to the pressure well, or is he going to be a bit fractious? Because it was interesting what happened last year in Connacht, Matt, where a coach with a good resume comes in but doesn't seem to deal with the pressure well and kind of reacts to too many things, and suddenly he's gone in a year. What about Andy?
No, I think David Nusafora would know Andy pretty well from his time at the Brumbies in Canberra. Andy's a Canberra guy, come up to Sydney to live basically for his coaching. He's a very calm, very laid-back type of guy. As I said, he's been through a fair bit in his coaching. I think he'll be very calm. I think he would also have gone into Connacht with his eyes wide open. I don't think that would be a shock to him what he's walking into in any way, and I think he would know what sort of role he has to play there. And we all know how difficult Connacht is in the real terms of the unfairness of the financial structures and so on that they face. So it's I think Andy will, like all coaches, every single coach there finds it hugely challenging. They have one incredible season, but generally year after year, it is a challenging role because of the restrictions that Connacht face.
There's no doubt. He was on the show about a fortnight ago, and he spoke very well. He talked about, it was almost Pat Lam-esque actually in a striking kind of way. He talked about community. He talked about Connacht. He wants them to play with tempo and an expansive game and put bums on seats and players to enjoy it, and getting families back involved at the club. And maybe that hadn't happened so much under Kieran Keane's reign, based on what we've heard from different people. So he certainly seemed to bring a good degree of positivity to the whole thing. And maybe it's the real legacy of Pat Lam, that when he's talking about things like expansive rugby, that is now what you want to see at Connacht and almost associate with them.
Well, he was the sevens coach. He wants to play in an expansive way, but a bit of the charm offensive is never bad. And I think you can react to some of the iniquities in sport by bitching about them, or by just dealing with it and trying to deal with what you can do. And if he continues in that form, that would be fine. And I still think that there is a sense of freedom in Connacht. Connacht are still a cracking team to watch. They may not win all the time, but they have a great sense about them, which I have to say is progressive. And in many respects, they are under less pressure than the other provinces. There's a sort of historical expectation in the other provinces that they have to be winning all the time. I do think you get a bit more leeway in Connacht. They're fairly rabid fans up there, but they just really want things to go well, but they're not necessarily looking for perfection just yet. And I do think if you get the crowd and the whole Connacht family on side, I think you're in a better position. I think he started well.
So Connacht beaten by Glasgow and Munster away to Glasgow on Friday. It's a 7:35 kickoff. I'm not sure what we can take from 38-0 over the Cheetahs. That's fairly insipid showing, especially first match and everything. But there we are. Did you see much of this, Keith?
Yeah, I watched a good bit of it. It was. Look, it was an early season game. I don't think you can read too much into all of the games, though I will say I just think the Pro 14 looks more serious earlier, and it has done in the last 2 or 3 years. It just seems to, ever since it got out of the last World Cup cycle, it seems to have kind of kicked off in the first week at a fairly high rate. Cheetahs, unfortunately for them, weren't at a high rate. They were very lacklustre in defence, no defensive line. So a fairly callow Munster team were able to put them to the sword pretty well. Do you know what? I really liked some of the guys that came in and did well. I thought Botha did incredibly well. He gets a chance to put his name up in lights before some of the other players get back, and he plays like an absolute wrecking ball, which is great. Neil Cronin, I thought, looked just very busy at 9, and that's very important as well. And I thought Munster did what they were supposed to do. Of course, they'll be rusty, and of course, some things won't work very well. And we can't get too kind of head up in September, is my view. You have to get your way through September. If you can get the points, it's fantastic. If you lose a few, it's not the end of the world. And that's something now that would have killed me to say as a player, but you have to do it in the reality of a long season, and the standard in this competition is getting better year by year.
Joey Carberry came off the bench on 53 minutes, showed a few glimpses. I think he put someone in for a try anyway. There was a nice skip pass, and I guess it's nice for him to get settled and get his feet in the ground and acclimatise and get used to a red jersey and all that kind of stuff.
Look, I just want to see him play 10 and 10 and 10 and 10, because we need him for Munster, but we need him for Ireland. You need to have those options. He has got unbelievable feet, and a lot of that gets kind of missed sometimes by the fans, but he puts himself into space and other players into space because they have no idea whether he's going left or right, and that's something that's really, really good. He does see things pretty early, and he has got serious gas. So even if it isn't over 50 yards, it's the gas over that 3, 4, 5 metres that puts defences under a huge amount of pressure. It was a really good cut-out pass. Sweetenham got his hand to touch it. He was wondering whether it was for him or not. By touching it, he got absolutely smashed by the defender. But it was a cracking pass, cracking score. He had a beautiful kick into touch, and he did those things that you kind of want to see guys doing. Yeah, let's not just kick it in, let's kick it right into the corner. I mean, it was about a metre from the line. Look, there was a good reaction from the crowd. He'll have much sterner tests ahead, but I have to say it was kind of nice to see him in a Munster jersey, much and all as I know that might upset people.
Yeah, that's just trolling people at this stage, really.
Yeah,
Joe, can I
talk to us about Carberry, Matt. Yeah.
On Keith's point, if we come back to New Zealand, we talk about Mackenzie. Carberry is Mackenzie-esque. He's got great feet. He's a slight man, but one of the things that makes New Zealand also so dominant is the players that come on in the second half. And I'm not going to use the term bench. They're impact players. They lift the game. They change the game.
Thought you were going to go with the finishers. You're a big fan of Eddie Jones, I know.
Yep, and they're all good terms to change our concepts. And God, I'm not quoting Eddie Jones. No, I'll draw the line. But for Carberry, for him to get his confidence up, and as Keith said, he just needs time. He needs time in the saddle. He's got to play. Yeah. And there'll be some bad days. There'll be some good days. He just needs time. But that's the sort of role that Ireland need him for. He mightn't put Sexton out in the next 12 months to 2 years. But that's his role for Ireland, and long term he's going to be, hopefully the 10. But I couldn't agree more with Keith. I thought some of the things he did were lovely. That pass was special, and he puts his body on the line, but it's his footwork. And for all the young players, everyone out there, it's all we talk about. He's got the gift of the footwork, and he'll be a real bonus for Munster.
So in some respects, he's got the really difficult stuff down, the stuff maybe you can't teach necessarily, Matt. What's he going to learn now over the next couple of weeks and months? And you talk about the difficult days. So what are the root causes of those difficult days for him when he's trying to think about what do I need to do over the next 18 months to really start putting pressure on Sexton?
It's an interesting one for me in that I think a 9 and 10 combination are just the key to a successful team in the modern game. I suppose they probably always were, but I think even more so because the 10s have such little time now with the speed of the defensive line. They don't get a lot of time to move that ball. You go back to the great 10s of the past like Mark Ella and even, Phil Bennett, Barry John. These guys had a lot more time on the ball, where now our 10s have very little time. So it's harder to develop those skills and be more comfortable with how you use your depth as a 10, whether you're flat or whether you come deep. He has to play with that. Now, he hasn't got Connor Murray there at the moment, and I think Connor Murray will make his life much easier. I'm not criticising any of the young nines that are there at the moment. I just mean when you're playing with one of the best, in my point, the second best 9 in the world behind Aaron Smith, he's going to give you a lot of comfort in that journey. But he just has to fit into the style of Munster, how they play. I watched him a few times there. He wanted that ball on some of those tries, but the forwards were rumbling up off 9 and did score the try. But I could see him calling for the ball because there were overlaps out wide. He didn't get the ball, and he'll be going back in at training and say, listen, boys, when I call for the ball, I get the ball. Now, Johnny Sexton would be saying it, yelling it, demanding it, and putting a few extra words in. He's got to get to that point where when he calls for the ball, it doesn't matter what's happening on the planet, he gets the ball.
Okay.
And if he doesn't get it, he lets people know about it. That's what you've got to develop. He's got to be the leader of that offensive team. And that's him settling into the Munster jersey, being able to say to old heads, like Billy Holland, listen, mate, I want the ball, get out of the way. And that's hard for a kid to do when you're new at a club.
Yeah, I think he'll get to that. I mean, he doesn't want to turn Munster into Leinster, and that won't work or happen either. But what he does need to do is, as you say, take control, be the guy who gets the ball, understand a sense of game management, understand how to manoeuvre a team to a win. He's played precious little at 10. And there's an element of experience that's required for that. And I know we've touched on this in the past, but like Ron Nogara went through an awful lot before he came the Ron Nogara that we remember now as this guy who would always manage every game and kick his kicks and win his trophies. He went through periods when that didn't happen for him. And all of that time gave him a sense of, okay, under this circumstances I do this. Now, I think the players that are coming through now are far more intent on the analysis that they have to watch, and I think they can accelerate that very, very quickly. But I just want to see him play, understand that sometimes actually a good old hoof that dribbles into touch over the fullback or over the winger's head is actually exactly the right thing to do. And you'll also understand there's a bit of a cadence to Thomond Park, and they do like some of the kicks, and they do like those things that put teams under pressure, and they do like a good carry on, and they do like something that is a bit rough and tumble, and he'll get that.
Yeah,
I can't believe that, Keith. I can't believe those things you just said that I love down in Thomond Park, man.
Well,
high kicks kicking there and a bit of rough and tumble. I can't believe that from a Munster crowd.
Yeah, little bits of it would be fine, Matt.
They love it, and you're exactly right. There's keeping the ball in front of your forwards is a skill that a lot of young 10s aren't doing, and it is to keep that ball in front of your forwards for periods of the game is an essential skill.
Yeah, no doubt. Clock is starting to come against us, so very, very quickly, because I do want to get on to Leinster, and we've only got about 2-3-4 minutes. Keith Hanrahan talked about really enjoying, he moved back to 15 when Carberry came on, said he enjoyed the extra bit of freedom there. Could he potentially do something at 15? Could we be looking at Hanrahan 15 and Carberry 10 down the line?
Well, I think you need to look at, from an Irish perspective, I think Carberry is the guy that we need to see at 10. But I would always look to try and get your best players on the field. So you want players playing with confidence and enjoying what they're doing. And if Hanrahan can fit at 15, and it means that we have 2 strike runners on the wings, that'd be fantastic. But there's a lot of guys to come back. He'll be under a lot of pressure for that to happen. I thought Conway played very well towards the end of the season. Keith Earls and Sweetenham at the weekend. I mean, he got injured and fell out of favour a little bit last year, but that guy picks stuff up at a ferocious rate. I still think we haven't seen anywhere near as good as that guy can be, and he can push into the Irish jersey.
Yeah, he was man of the match, actually, is worth mentioning. So Leinster then, Matt, they missed 23 tackles and they sent over the bare bones, and they were behind for a good chunk of this game and came away with a bonus point win. I mean, even when they're trying not to, they seem to win.
Yeah, the numbers were pretty amazing in that game. As you say, Joe, that number you just mentioned there, the missed tackle, stood out to me. But they dominated possession and they dominated position, almost 2/3 of it. But, you've got to take your hat off to Leo and the organisation. They got a lot of criticism. They're disrespecting the competition. What they're doing is they're developing young players. They sent away what people perceived as a seconds team, and I don't buy that, because they won. And those young men went over there. They had a job to do, and they did it. We just spoke about Joey Carberry. The only way you develop players is by playing games. And coaches and organisations have to be brave and give players time. And that philosophy on that selection is why Leinster it's not the only reason, but it is a major reason in why Leinster are developing this huge pool of players and producing talent at a pretty outrageous rate. To go to the Old Arms Park, that beautiful little field outside the Millennium Stadium, with a very inexperienced side, and to come away with a win on the first day of the year, that's a serious statement, not necessarily for the competition, but for what the club's about in developing players. And I really admired the courage in it, and the result. The players backed the coaches and the staff up with the result. Yeah,
Stuart Lancaster talked about the need to tighten things up defensively, but it is first day out and it's probably inevitable. Joe Tamane is going to be a success, big success long term. There's a few kind of grumbles. It wasn't the most auspicious debut, but it's tough for a number of reasons when you're trying to slot into a game like that. Matt, have you seen much Tamane down the years?
Yeah, I have. He's a very powerful guy, very powerful runner, slightly different to what Leinster might have had in the past in those roles. Joe and Keith, we've spoken often about the concept of a 12 being a second five, as the New Zealanders say, someone that's got a bit of a sleight of hand, a passer, almost an out half playing there. Well, he's not it. He's a very powerful guy. He's got a good passing game. I'm not putting him down, but he's a very different 12 to what Leinster have had for many, many years. But I do think he'll be successful there. But I do think it'll take him some time to adjust. I think if you remember, Ben Teo found it difficult. Now, he was at 13. He found it difficult to adjust. And the way Leinster play, while it's quite Australian in its philosophy, there are big changes when you come from the south to the north in that type of player. So he'll need a little bit of time to bed in. But I'm pretty confident he'll make a good fist of it.
Right, okay. Any final thoughts on Leinster's start, Keith?
No, I thought for the team that they put out, I thought it was magnificent to go away from home and get your 5 points. I think that's incredible, and I think we'll see during this season, and you don't really want to be talking about a World Cup really when you're talking the first weekend of the season, but I think we will see some selections where players will be given a go for the very simple reason we will, and that's Ireland, manage our players to make certain we have the best players available for the World Cup to go and deliver for the World Cup. And I think that will be an overarching concern all the time, trying to make certain that players aren't rushed back from injury. I think you'll see some other selections of players that are brought in for 3 and 4 months at a time, just to make certain that we could get them back in sooner, but let's not force that. Let's make certain we've other things that can be done, which I think is what has happened in the Conor Murray situation. I thought it was an excellent selection to be able to bring a player in for 4 months, and he's got quality, and it just takes a lot of pressure off everything else, not just from Munster but from Ireland. And I think we'll see lots of that during the year. I don't think it'll see a dip in the quality of the competition, because I think a lot of the young guys coming through now are starting from a much, much higher base than in even 5-6 years ago. So I think some of the players will be household names by the end of this season.
Okay. Matty, Keith, thanks a million, lads. Cheers.
Pleasure.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Eir Sport. Every Champions Cup and now every Pro 14 game only on the Eir Sport pack.